quite frankly, right now in the cellular market, it is difficult to differentiate. These wireless operators are being tasked with, next to the impossible, which is, holding on to a melting ice cube of, ARPU, right? It is basically you have some revenue right now, but it keeps getting smaller and smaller, and you thought you had something in your hand, and actually you may not at the end of the day, because everyone wants voice to be for free, right? And there's been a real trend in flat rate services and people actually driving towards flat rate bundled models for ease of budgeting and customer satisfaction. But it's really, what it really trends down to is that it gets more and more commoditized. And if the wireless operators want to be disintermediated from the whole process and become just basically copper wires in the sky, they've got to start doing some more advanced services. And FemtoCells is quite frankly one of the best options. It's not just from trying to take subscriber churn and reduce that. It's basically building calling plans. It's basically having a customer satisfaction story that really relates to the fact that you can have a unified customer experience for yourself, to stem the tide of customer churn. Mobile data, quite frankly, has started to blossom. I like the fact that when I use my wireless service, the Yahoo client on the BlackBerry, it actually it's got a lot of utility to it, and that's what's going to drive people to your service, is having a handset that actually has some neat applications that work and work well. Most of the carriers, actually, quite frankly, can't really continue to build their business hoping that subscriber counts go up. They have to invent other widgets to increase the revenue, because it's hard to outpace churn, customers moving to new technologies and other applications. Plus, I think, which is really the real interesting dilemma that any carrier has, is you spend money on this infrastructure, you need to get a payback. And it is very problematic to think that you can still keep having dropping revenue, and these things are tremendously expensive. I saw the 700 megahertz frequency plan was a $19 billion FCC charge to go ahead and do that. You're going to have to make that money back somehow. Marketing professionals here, we have seen kind of aghast at the fact that people would actually have a marketing model to say, hey, buy a FemtoCell because my service really stinks, but if I put this in your house, it's going to be better. That's not a good marketing message. So what we want to have is, hey, let's tie this together. Let's do a family plan. If you've got 2 people on Sprint and 2 people on Verizon, let's get them all on Verizon. Let's go ahead and bundle all the services together. Let's get a family calling plan that really makes sense. And then what I really particularly like in the home zone concept is the thought of a unified customer experience. If you're a triple play provider, a quadruple play provider, when they first started doing caller ID that pops up on your TV, when you have a web interface that looks like your cellular phone interface, when you have a cable set-top box that actually promotes a same unified user experience, you're starting to talk about a familiarity with the platform. And that's where a lot of the mobile operators would really like to go. Familiarity breeds less churn, breeds higher revenue potential, and I think that that's one of the key drivers of the home zone approach is this unified plan and being able to get other people off, quite frankly, hostile territory. I think if you own the wire into a customer's house as an operator, you should feel like, I need to be able to provide the best service possible to those customers, and quite frankly, I have to work hard to get it. Highlighted how much the FemtoCell could cost as a procurement model. We're really seeing actually a subsidized model. Seeing, people are saying, look, if we can get those buyers off of multiple other people's plans, bundle it in, we'll go ahead and we'll subsidize the entire FemtoCell. And I think that's a good way to go. That's really kind of been the way that like Vonage and others have seen that creates less friction in the marketplace. This is the first time that a wireless operator has opened up the mobile core. It's the first time. Big bad internet's on one side of the wall, the heathens are knocking at the door and they're trying to get in, and the pristine mobile core is on the other side, right? So you've got to have a high level of security to be able to take millions of subscribers into this network and be able to do it in a very effective manner. We talk a little bit about frequency planning. These are public frequencies. These are the underlying carriers' frequencies that go onto these FemtoCells. So bleed over and in dense urban areas, when you have lots of FemtoCell users in the same building, there's some frequency planning issues that are being attacked and decided right now. When you deploy a FemtoCell, it's very similar to an ATA when you have a configuration parameter. You plug it in, phone's home over the public internet, pulls a configuration down. However, some of the things that are required in a FemtoCell is the frequency planning. So GPS is actually bundled inside the FemtoCell. So it phones home and then gets registered as part of that carrier's underlying network. If you take the FemtoCell on vacation and you're in an area where your FemtoCell provider doesn't have frequencies, it actually will disable the platform. It just seems to be, unfair as this is in the United States, the richer you are, the more power you have, making sure that nobody actually builds a cell phone tower. And so high wealth individuals keep all the cell towers out. Well, guess what? They have bad coverage. So there's going to be some, there's pockets of these large, housing developments that say, we want femtocells. We don't want cellular towers, but femtocell sounds like a good idea. Don't want to switch out phones. Want to have an easy, path to turn out these services. Well, it turns out everyone's complaining in the same direction. Operators want to save money. They don't want to do backhaul. They don't want to build more towers. Users want to use the same phones, and they want to be able to have the same distribution and fulfillment strategies. So that has enabled a really fast thought process on fulfillment and keeping the friction quite low to get these services out of play. You've got a FemtoCell as a registration. It's got users that are authenticated. The interesting part is that your cell phone is prepared to take these calls without you doing anything with the cell phone, because it's always looking for a cell tower. So as soon as this cell phone actually self-configures and auto-optimizes for its environment. So when it's not auto-optimized, that means it either ratchets down its radio emissions in a crowded environment or ratchets up to its maximum power. It is basically getting a feed from its environment to understand what it is actually doing. And not all femtocells do this, but this is something we've seen as part of this deployment offering. And then it's secure IPsec tunnel. So remember I told you, the heathen's on one side. You're actually now, unfortunately, you're going through the big bad internet. And what the wireless carriers want to do is shut that off. As you authorize to the HLR, basically your home agent system, you are now a wireless endpoint, an IP endpoint that basically is emulated from a cellular tower. So you are now one step closer to having your handset being a SIP-enabled handset. Even though it's not, you're now one step closer. And you got high-speed bandwidth, and you got the availability of more bandwidth to do even more functions. So what's missing from here is actually the state and presence of your phone, which is why I like to talk about industry analysts and thought leaders that are in the space, is that if I have a new state on my phone, if I can do video conferencing, presence, IM, but when I go out to the macro radio network, it's going to be slower. Some of those permissions shouldn't be allowed. You shouldn't, but you should be able to maintain the call state. So if you're on a conference call doing a WebEx and doing a video conference, if you're inside, you should be able to do that. And then as you move off, your network and your phone should be smart enough to understand that I need to change the state. I need to change the concept of what I'm able to do and eliminate permissions. And I think that's where more sophisticated buyers are going to start driving this service. They don't want to think about it. They just want it to happen. And the people that do that are going to actually have a technological advantage. It's called the open femto model, which is basically if you have femtocells in a dense urban area, do you want to actually leave them open and let that be just as part of your roaming network and have it open, or will that just be too controversial for somebody else getting to use your bandwidth in your house, right? And maybe you want to opt into it. So currently right now it is very user specific. As you deploy a femtocell, it's very, it's phone number, it's SIM card specific, it's devices specific to that specific account. However, operators are starting to see there might be a benefit to having an open model to the proliferation of these the femtocells. If I may make a real small point here, those frequencies technically, whether you're in Europe or here, technically they're the public's, and these companies buy these for the right to use them. There is some thoughts that, hey, look, if there's a mandate for them to utilize these in a very public fashion, that they'll have to comply. I don't think it'll go that way. I think that the precedent's been set, but I think that there's an opportunity that people could voice a dissent. Go look at truephone.com. I was on a panel with James Brody. They basically have over in Europe a lot more competition when it comes to mobile handsets. And there's an unlimited data plan for 3G services from Hutchison over there in UK, and they basically run a SIP client right directly on a phone. So they have a landline, they have basically a regular GSM phone and a SIP client riding on the same phone. They make and receive phone calls all day, and they do it on an unlimited plan. So it's kind of an interesting, almost like a Vonage model, but over 3G wireless. So it's something to take a look at, because you're going to see some innovators that are going to come out of this space that are going to come from unlikely sources.